Well, hello guys. It's been a while, but welcome back to Let's Talk Esports. I know it's been a little bit since I've done one of these. Of course, last time I was probably talking about some controversy or other things going on with the ALGS, but we're here to talk about something different here. We're talking League of Legends. We're talking CBLOL because tomorrow we kick off Split 2 of 2023 here in Brazil, and it's going to be an absolute banger. I'm so excited. I've been just chomping at the bit for this split to get started because Split 1 was so much fun this year. And I wanted to come on and talk to everybody today about some things you need to know. So whether, you haven't kept up to date maybe with some off-season news, maybe you missed Split 1, or maybe tomorrow is the first time you've ever watched Brazilian League of Legends, here's some stuff that I think you should know going into this weekend's game. So let's start off just right at the top with a very easy one for everybody, and that's who competes in the CBLOL. This is, of course, mostly directed at you viewers who maybe have never watched CBLOL before, and maybe your only exposure to Brazilian League of Legends is some of the teams that make it to international events. Of course, this past MSI was Loud. So let's talk about the teams that you'll see in CBLOL this split. Like a lot of other regions, and a great analog here, the makeup is a good mix of organization and teams that are kind of that old guard. When you're in NA, you talk about TSM, Cloud9, TL, and others, and some fresher, newer blood in the region. That old guard, though, these should be names that are likely to familiar to a lot of you, even if you're watching CBLOL for the first time this weekend. Pain Gaming should ring a bell. Red Canids, Loud, of course, we just saw them at MSI here recently. Kaboom, INTZ, and then, of course, Furia. And then when it comes to the new blood, the team's a little fresher to the CBLOL. You're going to have Liberty, Fluxu, Los Grandes, and Vivo Cade Stars. So those are the 10 teams you will see competing this split, returning here from Split 1. Now, let's talk about what happened last split. 2023 has been very fascinating to watch in Brazil so far, and I only think it's going to get better this time around. But let's talk about kind of some of the major storylines and trajectories of different teams throughout last split. So coming into the split, the team that absolutely lit CBLOL on fire at the start of Split 1 was Los Grandes. Ranger in the jungle, Natuno doing incredible things down in the bottom lane, and Natuno being that dominant regular season AD carry that he regularly is. Los absolutely shot out to an incredible start. They were 8-2 through the first 5 weeks of Split 1 this year, and they were the early favorites to win CBLOL. Of course, some things changed, and we'll get into that a little bit later, but right out the gate, it was Los Grandes lighting things on fire. Middle of the season, it was Fluxu. Now, a name you might recognize on here if you watch Worlds from 2022 is Brunsey, the bot laner for Loud at that event. Decided to leave Loud at the end of 2022 after what was a bit of a disappointing performance at Worlds. Brunsey gets a new contract, heads over to Fluxu with this brand new roster, hoping to make some noise. And while they started a little slow in the split, they absolutely turned it on in the middle of the split. Huge winning streak, and going into the last few weeks of the split, looked like maybe that new favorite, Los Grandes, had started to fall off a little bit, had been taking some losses that people weren't quite expecting from them. Meanwhile, Fluxu was absolutely on a tear, and going into the last few weeks of play, had a very favorable strength of schedule. They had some matchups that a lot of people were like, man, if you just tie up the loose ends on a couple of these matchups that you should win, you should be coming in an incredible position. But unfortunately for Fluxu, they hit their own stumbling block. Los Grandes right after kind of that week 5 mark, and Fluxu was going into weeks 8 and 9 that they started to run into some trouble. Meanwhile, 2 big sleeping giants found their form in the back half of the season. Loud and Pain didn't start the split as strong as some folks hoped. Of course, Loud was bringing back almost the entire roster that had won the Split 2 championship back in 2022. The only addition was a brand new import Korean AD carry, but everybody else was the same. They started a little slow. Pain Gaming coming in, they had gone to back-to-back finals in Brazil. and they started slow as well. But those teams found their form late in the season. So while Los was falling off, and while Fluxu doing a little bit of the same, Loud and Pain found their form. Both teams ending the split on a 6-game winning streak going into playoffs. They were absolutely lighting the league on fire. In the end, the teams that did make it to playoffs were Pain, Loud, Los, Furia, Red Canids, and Fluxu. So that meant that Liberty, Vivo, Cade Stars, Kaboom, and INTZ did not make it into the dance. So Pain and Loud, with those strong finishes, they ended up tied for first place alongside Los Grandes. Los Grandes, though, unfortunately lose the tiebreaker, so they actually fell down to third, and they had to match up with Loud in round number 1. Meanwhile, Pain was up against Red Canids in round 1. Los, unfortunately, they fall to Loud. Their struggles continue. Loud with a strong start. Pain, meanwhile, they take down Red Canids, so we get a very early juggernaut matchup in the winners bracket final. It's Pain and Loud, and this one was so much fun. And Loud took care of business. They take down Pain, and they get that spot directly into finals for Split 1. Meanwhile, lower side of the bracket, Fluxu and Furia, the first matchup there on the lower end of the bracket. Furia with a dominant 3-0 sweep of Fluxu, so the troubles continue. They stumble into playoffs, and then they get swept by Furia right off the bat. And just like that, Fluxu's split is done in Split 1 of 2022. Furia started to look like maybe they could be the Cinderella story, because then they went on to beat Red Canids in their next matchup. And this is the deepest that one of these lower seeds, 5th and 6th seed with the newer playoff format in Brazil, Furia made it the deepest of any team since this format was instituted, but unfortunately, they did run into a wall because Los were able to figure things out after that Loud matchup, and they did take out Furia in the lower bracket to keep their hopes alive. Now, you're down to your top 3. You've got Los Grandes and Pain meeting in the losers bracket final, I should say, and you've got Loud waiting in Grands. The series between Los Grandes and Pain was so much fun. These teams going back and forth. It goes a full 5 games, but Pain wouldn't be denied. They had already made back-to-back finals in Brazil, and they made it 3 in a row, beating Los Grandes in 5 games to go to Grands and earn that rematch with Loud. But unfortunately, the pain continues, pun intended, I guess, as Pain make it to grand finals, but end up losing to Loud. Loud takes the title. They get to go to MSI. They are now back-to-back champions in CBLOL, and Pain continuing to try and figure it out. So that is how things went down last split. Now, let's talk about maybe some of the things that have changed since last split. Let's talk about some roster moves. Of course, things always interesting in between splits in a year. So often it's talked about how difficult it is to make significant changes in the middle of the year. A lot of teams are hesitant to do so. It's certainly more difficult to bring players in. A lot of talk about how much harder it is to import with that shorter time restriction between your first and second split of the year. Didn't quite apply to Brazil because there were a ton of moving pieces. Only 3 teams in the CBLOL are returning their entire starting 5 from split 1. That is Fluxu, INTZ, and Loud. They're all coming back intact as is. Loud makes a ton of sense. Fluxu, I would certainly agree. There's a little bit of question marks about maybe INTZ should have done something. Ultimately, they're running it back. And it is important to note that they were one of the teams that just missed out on playoffs. Furia finished at 9-9. Meanwhile, INTZ finished tied with Kaboom at 7-11. So you could make the argument that INTZ was right on the cusp, and they think that with the work that they've done in this offseason, that maybe they can get it done this time around. We will have to see. Now, let's talk about some of the big moves that got made. Of course, we talked about Los Grandes, how good they were at the start of the split, but what kind of changes did they want to make based on how things ended, the struggles at the end of the regular season, the first loss against Loud, and then, of course, not being able to get over the hump up against Pain in the losers bracket final. They decided they needed to make some changes. So let's talk about what those were. Some very interesting ones is they make a change in jungle, but their jungler doesn't leave the roster. Los Grandes bring in Trick. You may know him from his time on G2. Very, very well experienced jungler in professional play, but of course has not been as big of a name as of late. But we know who Trick is. Trick comes into the jungle, and Ranger moves to support. So it's now going to be a Ranger and Natuno bottom lane for Los Grandes. This is definitely one of the more out there moves, but it could work. And I'm excited to see what Ranger looks like down in the bottom lane. So that's what we're looking at for Los Grandes. Meanwhile, Furia in a very interesting position. Of course, we talked about how they really tried to make that Cinderella run from the lower bracket and unfortunately ran into Los Grandes and ended up getting knocked out. But Furia had a strong finish to the split and looked pretty solid. But it's important to note that Goot is the only Furia player returning to their role from Split 1. The entire 4 other positions on the map are all different, but it is important to note that IU still on the roster, but there's another role swap here. IU, who looked really good for Furia at support, is moving to bottom lane, so they're making some interesting changes there. But Goot, the only player of those 5 that finished with Furia last split, that are coming back to their same position here in Split 2. Meanwhile, let's talk about Vivo Cade Stars, a team we haven't talked a bunch about so far. They had an okay split, but they did only finish with 5 wins, tied for last place with Liberty. But this is still a really compelling team, and they had a very kind of chaotic split in terms of rosters in Split 1. They had the most chaotic in terms of moving players in and out, making changes, subbing players in, and adjustments all throughout Split 1. And so this roster is looking very different, but it is important to note that 3 of the players that started in their final game of the split are back. It's the entire top side of the map. Gigo, Rel, Revthar, they're all in. So the solo laners and the jungler from that final game of the split are back in the fold, but they've put together a new interesting bottom lane. They've got Trigo coming over from Furia, and they've got Damage coming over from Pain. So 2 players that were playing in multiple best of 5s in playoffs for Split 1 have now joined the team. They're teaming up in this bottom lane alongside Gigo, Rel, and Grefthar to try and get things going for VKS. And I think, honestly, I'm not picking VKS to be maybe a top 3 finisher, but I think this is a very compelling roster to keep an eye on, especially early on in the split. They've got some tough early matchups, but I think VKS can make some noise. Next, let's talk about some games to watch this weekend. Of course, 10 games ahead of us this Saturday and Sunday that you're not going to want to miss out on. Some of the highlights for me, of course, is going to be Pain and Loud starting day 1. Of course, it's the rematch of the title game from the past 2 splits, right? Pain and Loud have met in finals in Split 2 of 2022 and Split 1 here in 2023. Of course, Loud winning both of those best of 5s. Pain looking for some redemption here. Of course, some adjustments to the roster. They'll be looking to start on a strong note. A couple other games that are going to be really good on day 1. Fluxu and VKS. Of course, I already just talked about VKS and how they're honestly a pretty compelling team to keep an eye on. I also think Fluxu is going to see a bounce back. Brunsey with a little bit of a sophomore slump, though had some highlights in Split 1. I'm expecting Brunsey to come back. I think there's a ton of talent on this Fluxu roster. I liked what I saw from them in the middle of the split, and I was really honestly pulling for them going into playoffs. And while things didn't work out there, I'm hoping what they've done in the offseason has them coming in with a bunch of momentum. So keep an eye on that one. The other one on day 1, Red Canids and Furia. 2 historic orgs. Should be a really fun game. And my eyes are on what Furia is going to be able to do with the big changes that they made to their roster. I'm also curious, how's IU going to look in the bottom lane? I was very impressed at times with IU's play at support. Can he bring that to a different role for this team? So keep an eye on those 3 games on day 1. Meanwhile, on day 2, it's Loud and Fluxu that my eyes are on the most, because especially, if I'm hyping up Fluxu and VKS and I have a lot of hope for Fluxu, if they can get a win on day 1, this matchup with Loud on day 2 is a huge prove it match. If Fluxu can go 2-0 in week 1, that is a huge statement for this team. And it's a really good sign that things went well in the offseason, and then they're coming in confident, ready, and raring to go for Split 2. The other one I have my eye on is Furia and Pain. And it just kind of speaks for itself. They're two talented teams, two teams with high aspirations here in CBLOL, two teams trying to get back to playoffs and claim that title that has been eluding them as of late. Keep an eye on those 5 games this weekend. Now, the last thing that I want to talk about, and if you are watching this the day of upload, which it is Friday, June 9th, if you aren't on Twitter, you might have missed a very special announcement. There is now an official CBLOL English broadcast, and tomorrow morning you will see this guy's face hosting it. Of course, the announcement went out today of the talent team that is going to be a part of the CBLOL official English broadcast for its first ever split here in 2023. My very, very good friends Axeman, Dia, 4Y4, Hawk, Rudude, RMC, Trajan, and of course myself are all ready and raring to go. Of course, you may know us from our time covering CBLOL on the unofficial English broadcast, and we are now stepping onto the big stage alongside Riot and bringing you CBLOL action all split long. We are so very excited. It's honestly all we've been able to think about here over the last 8+ weeks or so throughout this entire process, and we are greatly looking forward to it. We can't wait to watch and bring this CBLOL action, the CBLOL diff, to all of you, because we think it is an incredibly entertaining, talented, and fun region to watch and follow, and we hope you will come along with us on the ride. Do want to say a very, very huge thank you to everybody at Riot and at the CBLOL teams. They have been wonderful throughout this entire process. I'm so excited to get to work with all of them. This is, a huge opportunity for me, a huge opportunity for everybody on this team, and we really are just looking forward to giving it our all and really knocking this out of the park. So we hope that you guys will come and support us. So if you're watching this and you aren't, maybe on Saturday or Sunday and you aren't already tuned in, the broadcasts kick off at 9 a.m. Pacific time, 12 p.m. Eastern on Saturday and Sunday, June 10th and 11th over at twitch.tv/CBLOL English. And if you're too lazy to type that out, don't worry, I'll throw the link down in the description. But I do encourage you to come out and watch and enjoy the show with us. And I'll show off. I do want to show off because they sent us these awesome care packages. So you already saw the mug, which I will be using on basically every show throughout this split. Looking forward to that. But some other cool swag that they sent our way. I'll show you real fast. My awesome Yasuo sandals that I've been wearing while recording this video. These things are awesome. They're so comfy. And while I don't play Yasuo, I absolutely love these sandals. They are incredible. Gorgeous CBLOL t-shirt. And, look, if you know me, you know I love black. I'm going to wear the hell out of this shirt all over the place. Well, is a gorgeous sweatshirt. Red is also my favorite color. Gonna be rocking this, so all that as well as some other very cool stuff that they sent our way. We feel very welcome, and we're very excited to be a part of what we think is going to be an awesome team. This split is going to be so much fun, and we just can't wait. So hey, I hope you're ready to go for Split 2 and CBLOL here in 2023. Again, if you're watching this the day of upload, it kicks off tomorrow morning. If you're watching this over the weekend, June 10th or June 11th, get out of here. You can finish, I guess we're at the end of the video, but you watch this later. Go watch the show, twitch.tv/CBLOL English, 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern. And hey, we'll see you there. Come and enjoy the CBLOL diff all split long.